At Vodafone, he has been pivotal in the transformation of the global supply chain function and has been a key contributor to the establishment of the Vodafone Procurement Company, which has over time centralized more than 70% of Vodafone's global spend. He currently serves as Group Head of Commercial Contract Management, where he is transforming how Vodafone is currently managing its relationships with strategic partners by driving stronger collaboration and transparency through best practices and automation. So welcome, Reinhard, and thank you very much for making the time to be with us today.
Thank you very much, Ajay, for your kind introduction. It is actually a real pleasure to have the opportunity to share a bit of our experiences and learnings as we are shaping our commercial contract management capability here at Vodafone and preparing for the future. Bit of a
thank you, Reinhard.
For us. Thank you, Ajay.
Thank you, Reinhard. And in addition to Reinhard, we will also be joined a little later by Tim Cummins, who is the President and CEO of IACCM. Most of you who are dialed in on today's call need no introduction to Tim. He was the visionary global contract head for IBM back in the early 90s and worked directly with Luke Gerstner and has created over time the principles of the global discipline, and then in later on CCM, which is the world's leading body for commercial contract management. So once Tim is online, we will of course hear from him directly. But for now, because we started a little bit late.
Ajay, I don't know if you can hear me, but I have managed to join you now from snowy Ottawa.
Welcome, Tim. Welcome, and I'm glad you've managed to overcome your technology issues. Welcome to the call, Tim. Over to you.
Thank you. No, thank you, Ajay. And I think this is a really important session. And if I may, I'm going to just sort of give a little bit of an introduction to Reinhard, because I think the work that he's been undertaking is of massive importance and significance. And certainly the conjunction of that with the technologies that Sirion Labs is now deploying is creating what for some industries is being termed a true commercial powerhouse. Now, why that matters, my first slide is going to talk a little bit about what are some of the key demands and pressure points that we're seeing as we travel the world talking with our members and through our research. And as I said, we are today up in Canada having meetings with a number of corporations here, following on from some very productive meetings around many parts of the US over the last 10 days. And one of the big themes we're seeing that's impacting organizations, both from the buying and the selling perspective, is the pressure for more and more commercial innovation, creating more collaborative, innovative relationships with suppliers and supply networks on one side, but obviously then bringing new models, new contracting approaches, new policies and practices to market in order to be more attractive, more competitive with customers. Underpinning all of that is also the need for greater agility. Contracts, legal, procurement groups have got to get out of the way. They've got to support business empowerment. They've got to support greater speed. And one of the challenges, of course, is the image of many of these groups that they are actually a source of slowing things down rather than speeding them up. And finally, the pressure on, again, those same groups increasingly to move from being a cost center to being able to really describe their role as a business unit and the more tangible value that they bring. So with those pressures in mind, let's just move on and look for a moment at, well, what are then some of the emerging trends that are underpinning that drive, but also enabling response to it. And certainly one of them is the rapid development really of new contract and commercial models. We're moving more and more towards an environment where we are perhaps battling less over traditional transactional activity and risk allocation, to one where there's more and more focus on outcomes, performance-based models, as a service, payment by results, shared benefit agreements. So very different economic models, which then of course drive the need for significant commercial reform within a business, not just in terms of the contract models and terms and conditions, but also of course often challenging some of the traditional management systems and measurement systems of the organization, which pushes commercial groups into being much more focused on business enabling. What do we need to do in order to streamline decision-making, facilitate decision-making, but also what do we need to do to challenge the business to change? So rather than being perhaps, as we've traditionally been seeing, something that is slowing down change, executives are increasingly looking for the business and management information that we can provide that will actually help them to understand the nature of the changes that need to be made, which of course is then reinforced by the outsights that we offer them. We are traditionally groups that have very good understanding of the internal mechanisms, therefore we understand the risks that are associated with different capability or requirement. But what we have often lacked is really good understanding of what's going on in the broader marketplace, and of course what the actual performance data is associated with the agreements and contracts that we put in place. So that quality of management information is another of those critical areas. We're needing to build collaborative networks, and that's both an internal and an external statement, and I'm sure it's one that Reinhard will focus on quite a lot, because trying to use common tools, common systems, building common databases so that we're not spending our time arguing over whose data is correct. These are sort of critical enablers of this new world. And finally, we're seeing in our community the need for far more in the way of leadership and influencing skills, that rather than being passive organizations that wait to be told what to do, we are increasingly taking on a leadership role, but that means we need to develop and enhance our presentation, communication, and abilities to influence the business to move forward in the right direction. So from that, what is the critical enabler? Well, the critical enabler is absolutely technology. Technology is driving much of the change around us. Technology is going to offer us the solution to many of our problems and challenges. And we're going to hear a great example of that today with the technology from Sirion Labs. Of course, it's not the only technology out there, but I think it certainly has some unique capabilities and capacities, and we're going to, I think, hear about those, and I believe it's a very impressive story. So as we look at transformation, we need to be thinking about that in context of our processes, our tools and instruments, as well as the technologies and skills that then underpin it. And with that, Reinhard, I'll pass to you, and let's get started on your story of the journey at Vodafone.
Thank you very much, Tim, for your introduction. It is indeed, I think you've stressed it quite well in the last message around, well, this is a transformation for us. It's been a journey, and it's generally something that takes time, and we will be sharing with you a little bit of what we've learned throughout the journey and where we are currently and how technology is underpinning what we are currently doing. To start with, I thought I'll just give you a brief overview about Vodafone, because how we've come about, how we've been growing has also a significant impact on how we set up for the future. So if we move on to the first slide I have, you would know that Vodafone is clearly it's a global company. We have a large geographical footprint. We are operating roughly over 80 different countries through either our direct operations or in our partner markets and affiliates. Same as we've been growing in terms of geographical pace, we've been also looking into new areas of business. So we've moved away from being just a traditional mobile operator into providing total communications either in the side of fixed broadband, customer TV and for customers, and now more and more Internet of Things, which is pretty much at the center of everything that everyone envisages for the future. Our brand is a very strong purpose. Our aspiration is really to connect everybody, as we say, to live a better today and build a better tomorrow. So we are quite heavily focused in driving innovation. We believe strongly in delivering to our customers, which is something that we underpin with, you will see the words at the bottom of the slide, with we care. This is really giving a promise to our customers around connectivity, around giving them control, rewarding them for their loyalty, and also enabling them to address any issues in case they face problems. Now, in order to enable this, clearly, when you look at the things from a supply chain perspective, you look into a big array of products and services that we need to procure to facilitate those services to our customers. And if you add to that the heavy activity that we had in the merger and acquisition space, which is also recently coming through the acquisitions we've done in UK, Germany, and more recently in Spain, to enable new business areas, brings in itself a significant complexity, because in practice we've inherited, or we are acquiring, multiple different ways of working, different systems and processes, and different views around about how things should be operating. If we move on, how does the Vodafone supply chain look at a glance, right? What you would see is that we procure across different business areas. We procure devices for mobile devices for consumers. We procure all the possible services for enabling our business. Same as the different technology, be it on the network space or on the IT space. Now, with the global footprint, also we require to do a deep transformation in our supply chain, which started already in 2007, which led to Vodafone centralizing the procurement of the vast amount of global spend, which today brings us to roughly 70% of our global spend being procured centrally through our established procurement company. Now, again, with that, there is also a significant change in the way we've been operating, because we moved away from local contracts to massively large global contracts and global relationships with our different vendors, which we were requiring to manage through our newly set procurement company. Now, of course, with the scale, there are clear benefits. We can engage with our suppliers better on a global scale. We can get better commercial deals and innovative models to deal with our suppliers and our partners. However, one question that has been always out there has been around, well, what happens after we have negotiated a deal? Are we really getting the full value for the contracts that we have? So if we jump into the next slide, I would like to share with you some of the questions that we've been asking us for some time, and I would challenge you back, most of you here in this webinar, is to what degree would you have direct answers to that? For us, it has been challenged in terms of looking into how we're governing and reporting on all our different contracts and our different relationships with vendors. By nature, all those relationships are quite local. And as we establish a new central function that is responsible for procuring on behalf of the group, well, the actual governance of those relationships becomes extremely important. However, we realized that we were not necessarily having the full visibility on the actual execution. Similarly, we would have multiple different systems and tools, starting from the procurement side to the actual in-life management of our contracts, which resulted in significant transformation by, on one side, centralizing our ERPs, which has given us a bit of the backbone, but then also asking the question around how we manage those suppliers in life. Similarly, as I mentioned earlier, having grown through M&A, we acquire different ways of working, different processes. So what we've seen over time is that every business unit has been driving the engagement with the suppliers in slightly different ways, and there is eventually a potential opportunity to streamline and to simplify the way we operate across the board. Now, having said so, these are elements that create quite a lot of variance, in the way that contracts are being managed, that contracts are actually understood, which then represented a challenge, because people, in essence, would be addressing or understanding the contracts in different ways, measuring performance slightly different, and even potentially altering by their current ways of working the actual essence of some of the contracts that we may have agreed. From our perspective, we looked into how to quantify this impact, and what we saw is definitely through variation of contracts, you will see value coming to us, contract leakage. Through the different ways of engaging across the organization, you will see an operational leakage both on our side but also on the supplier side, who actually needs to mirror the way we operate to be able to operate in a consistent manner, which potentially, due to the different interpretations, may lead to damages in the supplier relationship. Now, finally, the consistency in how we are managing risk across the organization is also endangered, because risk is not being looked at holistically, but rather individually across the different business units. So for us, that reconciliation between contract performance and the actual value, right, that we have with our suppliers is key, right? And that is, you could say, in a way, preventing to a degree value leakage. So that being the fundament, what we thought is, well, this is not the only area where we see contracts adding value, right? And what we decided is, if we move on into the next slide, is to actually determine what is the actual objective of a proper management of contracts in life. And what we thought is, well, on one side, the best way to start our business transformation is to determine those principles. And those principles, which you can find on the next slide, are very clearly to, on one side, reduce potential cost savings or potential cost to the organization, which I said are happening on both ends, on the supplier side and on the Vodafone side, because of the need of having to mirror operations or potential ineffective organizational structures. On the other side, really ensure that we are getting what we actually contractually committed, which are those really true cost savings that those contracts are actually binding us to, or even potential revenue uplift that we expect to get. On the other hand, really enable us to manage our risks more effectively. And for me, this is quite key here, because in essence, this is where actual true collaboration starts. Risks are actually seen at both ends. It's from a supplier perspective. In operating with Vodafone, you will be dependent quite heavily on Vodafone complying to certain practices, to certain obligations to deliver on services. Likewise, we are accountable for delivering to our customers and really rely on what our suppliers do for us. Therefore, again, having a clear view and a clear vision on how delivery is happening to enable our service to our customers is again key. Now, this is again a foundation of making our contracts, our engagement transparent across the board, which will then enable us to improve the relationship we have with our strategic partners, and ultimately allow us to look into further potential opportunities as a business. Now, having said those principles, what we looked at as Vodafone is, well, how to drive this transformation. And that transformation is a transformation that is going through time, right? And we looked into four main pillars. The first one is around our operating model. How should we operate in the future if we want to manage our contracts better and our supplier relationships better? If you look into the next slide that we have in the pack, you would see we've actually determined the ideal way on how we would like to manage every individual contract and supplier relationship. To a degree, it's quite theoretical, but in practice, there are some key elements that I would like to highlight here. Historically, we've been focusing on the sourcing. I would say most of the organizations would be focusing on the sourcing side of things. Now, how many organizations do have a clear and aligned process to hand over those newly defined contracts back into the business? I think that's a very itchy point, because if you look into the performance or the incentive drivers of the true procurement function and the rest of the business, they are not necessarily fully connected. On one side, get a contract, get a very good deal, cover all the risk, and then move on to the next one. But for us, it has been crucial to make that dependency clear, both on our supply chain side, but also on our delivery teams, to ensure that there is a proper handover process where everyone understands and has a common view around what is performance, what has been agreed, so that we don't have any potential issues in the future where people misinterpret or simply lack the knowledge about what the contract actually says. This should be underpinned by the right governance in a contract. And that governance needs to happen from top to bottom, to look into either projects, either contracts, and most to the top, the wider supplier governance that needs to be established, ideally also at executive level, so that we can really steer the whole relationship throughout time. And finally, get any potential issues and challenges on the table. And that is effectively what the governance is for, to really understand what are the potential problems and actually take the learnings from it and feed this back and circulate back into the contract and eventually amend the way we're operating, collaborating with our suppliers over time. Having this blueprint in place is quite essential, and also understanding who is responsible in the organization for doing what. We are clearly not looking into changing the scope of the roles of the local delivery teams that are responsible on the ground for getting services up and running. But what is clear for us is that they should operate within a given framework to ensure that we don't run into issues, or we don't let go on elements that are valuable for us in Vodafone. In order to underpin this view is clearly establishing the right supplier governance, as I mentioned before, and that is obviously something that needs to be done with a set of strategic vendors, and as you move in terms of value, strategic relevance will differ across the organization, but it needs to be part of the way of working. Finally, there's a piece where Sirion is helping us significantly now, is due to the amount of information flow that would happen across these different parts of the contract life cycle, to have a very strong technology backbone, right? And that is something that I would personally recommend to be looked at, but looked at the right point in time. Because I can only stress the fact that for us, this has been a business transformation. We've started our program around 3 years ago. It has been only last year when we truly engaged into getting a system up and running to ensure that we have already clear views and clear understanding within our business around how we operate. Now, in order to make this blueprint work, clearly this relies on people to start with, right? And this is the second element that we looked at Vodafone. Resources need to be allocated to the right function. There is something existing. We have global category managers procuring. We have people in the business running operations, running delivery. So there was a need within Vodafone to establish across the supply chain function a new role and that new role was labeled as commercial contract managers, who are actually the middle point between the truly sourcing managers and the business. They are the ones that are responsible of getting new contracts on, understanding those contracts deep to its deepest level of detail, and ensure that they spend time with the business, getting them up to speed on what are the terms and conditions that have been agreed, what are the options and alternatives we have if we want to change direction. And they are also the gatekeepers of any potential changes that we wish to do on our global contracts. Similarly, they sit obviously next to our business. They sit in every single operational unit we have and feed back to the center to our global contract managers, who then aggregate these views on a per supplier basis, which has been quite key. Now, how we've come about setting this up, reality is, as I mentioned before, is we've been centralizing spend over the years. As a result of that, we've also transformed the roles of the different individuals that we had within the organization, focusing part of the people in more sourcing, pure sourcing activity, and another set of people predominantly sitting in our local operations, who are then the relationship managers and contract managers in the organization. Having said so, again, this is a transformation, so it's a reshape in roles and responsibilities, requires to train people, to bring new skill set into the organization, to ensure that people are also fit for the actual duties. Now, considering the fact that this is also quite people dependent to a degree, the question here is around, well, how do you prioritize? It's from our perspective relatively simple to start with in terms of prioritization, but we know already what are the new type of services we wish to have. We can clearly map out what is the strategic relevance of all the different vendors that we have. Clearly, wherever we have a multi-market footprint, there is a likelihood for heavy priority in putting a set of vendors in scope of our wider program. But also when we start looking to new commercial models or suppliers where we see the need to having actually more structured governance, those are the vendors that typically qualify for having the full-blown contract management framework that we have established. Now, if you go further down the priority list, if we can say it that way, clearly the less interaction you have with some of the vendors, the less relevant they become to have a full-blown contract management function around them. And therefore, what we foresaw is already to have lighter views or lighter approaches for those vendors with whom we have less recurrent engagement, down to a degree where contract management is in a way only a transactional validation of contracts, invoices, and high-level performance, which is a bit of the essence. This model in itself allowed us to maneuver through the challenges of resourcing and the amount of contracts that we have across the board. Now, with this in place, the next question was quite obvious. Well, how do we make this work with the right technology? Technology clearly presents a key challenge for us. It was in a sense of we looked into multiple different options out in the market. I would say probably most of you would be looking or would be operating under specific ERPs. For us, the reality was that established ERPs didn't provide us the capabilities that we were looking at. And again, I stress here the point, we clearly developed our framework. We understood clearly what we wanted to have in terms of obligation management, risk management, and how we want to measure relationships with our key strategic vendors. And only then we embarked in a technology journey where we looked into all the possible options and then determined that it was not the traditional suppliers who could provide us the answer, but more companies that were emerging, and in this particular case, Sirion Labs, who really matched all the different requirements we had to cover the vast array of data that we have across the organization. And just to give you a view of the magnitude, you would say probably similar in many of your corporations, the amount of suppliers we deal with, the amount of contracts that we have across the board, the amount of different systems holding bits and pieces of projects and performance information that sits everywhere. So it was quite key for us to have a solution that would allow us to normalize the data and even further provide us the right business insight so that our organization can create a clear view on those strategic relationships and even further start to do some decision making based on the insights we get from the solution. Now, what convinced us about the current solution is clearly around, we were looking for a solution that is simple and user-friendly, a solution that would definitely enable collaboration, which is a feature that we are now starting to roll out across some of our key strategic suppliers, that would enable both Vodafone and our strategic partners to start getting some data insights of all the vast amount of contracts that we have jointly with those partners. And similarly, that is scalable to allow us on one side to grow in depth, right, in terms of what are the areas or the end-to-end contract life cycle that we wish to cover, right, starting from creation of a new contract, but also in terms of the number of suppliers, right, because we wish to grow and cover the vast majority of our global footprint with this solution. So, in a nutshell, leveraging on technology is extremely important. However, that decision needs to be taken at the right point in time if you want to really maximize the benefit out of it. Having looked into all these different areas, you would ask, well, what's the benefit for you so far? And for us, the benefit comes, I would say, in three areas, right? Two of them you will see depicted here. Clearly, what we are keen to have is clear compliance in the way that we operate, clear compliance with our blueprint, right, which are healthy business standards. Second is to have a clear view of what's the value that we bring into the organization, and which is a very itchy point, I would say, at the beginning when you actually determine what's your business case. But as you will be able to see probably in the next slide that we have in front of us, is the value that you get from the different interactions or for improving your contract grows steeply over time, and it grows not only because, yes, for sure, by holding the parties accountable for a contract, there is less value leakage here and there, but it actually starts enabling a proper and true collaboration to allow you to work with your business partners to understand what are the parts of the contract that need to be changed and potentially amended to drive more value for both parties. Similarly, it also allows us to not only measure the performance of our strategic partners, but also of ourselves, because in reality, every contract has two parties, right? And both parties have the equally obligations to fulfill so that we can drive the benefit for the organization. And I would say here we have very simple examples around, well, you could say in cases where are we obliged to provide forecasts to our suppliers, where are we obliged to provide certain type of specifications and support to our suppliers to actually enable them to deliver. Once you can actually start measuring that, to what degree we comply with our obligations, it becomes a slightly different discussion with your vendors. But as I said before, this is something that grows over time and needs to be developed. And as I mentioned, these are two aspects. A third aspect is in terms of collaboration and improving the relationship, because we are truly believing that by creating this transparency, our relationship with our strategic vendors will improve. As a result of that, we will be more transparent on potential issues, challenges, and opportunities we may see in the future in that joint collaboration. If we jump briefly to the next slide, I thought I'd just give you a very quick overview of what has been our journey, and I'll just jump through this very, very quick, but it's just to give you a flavor of what it is. We started with our system implementation around January 2016. It has taken us over, I would say by now, over a year to get it deployed in a relatively safe environment. We've started small. We started first with just part of the functionality to start giving visibility of obligations, of service levels. We've deployed it across a limited set of users, and only now we are starting to integrate the solution with our back-end system, which is SAP, but then now also with all the different systems that provide us performance information. And at this stage, we're starting to roll out the solution further across the organization. So due to the vast amount of functionality that you can get, my strong recommendation in this field is be very pointed on which are the areas that you think would bring you most of the value into your suppliers, and start by that and start rolling them out on a phased basis. What this is enabling up to this point, I think we have a view on analytics and insights that you can produce already from the solution. We can very clearly view in the next slide how information can be pulled together in a quite neat way through Sirion Labs to provide at an operational level all the necessary insights for an individual to start running and managing their contracts, but also at an executive level, getting them a very neat and simple overview of how performance is actually going through different regions, different markets, specifically how it is developing over time and across different functions. If you think about the potential here of benchmarking information across vendors and partners, it starts becoming even more powerful, which I think is the value that we start seeing already now. If we move quickly to the rest of the overview that we have, of course you will be able to deep dive and understand specific project performance, which is something that would get your delivery teams quite excited to really understand in a very simple way how your deployment of a network in our case is progressing, and really drill into the different views and insights. Now, if we move on,
Reinhard, this is Ajay jumping in. Just a quick time check. If you could look to wrap up in the next 2 to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Perfect. So I'd suggest, I think for me the points to stress, and maybe we jump to the last slide I have, is really for us it's a matter of this being a business transformation. It is key to drive awareness, to ensure that we have adoption. It is key that we deploy this and transform in time to ensure that we get all the different parts of our business along with it, and that we buy ourselves enough time to get this transformation going. If I think about what's the road ahead for us, we are quite ambitious in the engagement. On one side, on our program, we are quite clearly looking into deploying our program even further, driving even further collaboration with our vendors, ensuring that we can share information in a very simple need basis. And what we see in terms of Sirion Labs and the capabilities that we're working on in the future is for sure to drive even further operational efficiencies on one side, but on the other is really to become more predictive rather than prescriptive as we are today. So starting to use more cognitive solutions to combine the information we are getting from external sources with the information we're creating on Sirion to be a bit forward-looking and anticipate issues and challenges. Finally, in terms of collaboration, again, it is key for us to, as we having grown as part of a mobile company, to make that information also available to all our different stakeholders at any given point in time, which is the reason why we're looking into enabling a mobile app that provides a transparency across the board and across all the levels of the organization. With that, Ajay, I hand over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Reinhard, for a wonderful description of the enterprise journey at Vodafone. I'm sure all of the people listening in would have been very intrigued by some of the details that you have shared with us today. Just a few words on Sirion before I open up the discussion for Q&A, and we'll be very happy to take your questions in a few minutes. So Sirion was founded in 2012 by a group of industry experts, both on the buy side and on the sell side, who had been involved in the provisioning of complex services over the last 2 to 3 decades. My co-founder, Claude Murray, is widely regarded as one of the great industry experts, having led both General Motors and Coca-Cola through transformative phases of their complex service global arrangements. And our basic thesis was this: both buyers and suppliers manage each other, but they do so in a way that is out of sync with the other party. Therefore, 80% of the dialogue between buyers and suppliers ends up being about whose data is right. So we asked ourselves the question, is it possible to create a management environment in which both parties are looking at the same set of data? That was our thesis. We were fortunate to get the backing of Sequoia Capital along the way and being positively acknowledged by some of the industry analysts from Gartner, from Spend Matters, and so on. Next. And as we progressed on this journey, the problem statement started to come into focus. If you look at the slide in front of you, what we've tried to represent here is what both the buyer and the supplier are doing immediately after a large complex contract has been signed. And you can see it's very interesting that the silos that exist inside both organizations are virtually mirrored. There is a legal department in both sides handling the complex volume of changes. There is a service delivery organization and a performance management organization which complement each other. And what they have also done, each of these silos, is invest in productivity tools over time. So if it's the procurement department buying tools like Ariba, if it's sales buying CRM tools, legal and contracts investing in CLM solutions, service delivery investing in ITSM tools, and so on and so forth. And with the proliferation of these silos and the proliferation of these siloed tools, the experience of dealing with each other has become even more fragmented over time. This fragmentation is a driver, next slide, of value leakage. And this value leakage is experienced on both sides. The buyer doesn't end up getting the anticipated value from the business case, and the supplier doesn't end up realizing their projected revenue. So both parties end up, next slide, losing out on what they had anticipated. because of this inability to, let's put it in simple words, stay on the same page. So the original thesis behind Sirion was very simple. How do we put both parties on the same page? And if you can see, pictured in the middle of the slide, the green layer, that was Sirion. We would talk to the existing tools, we would leverage the existing investments made by both parties, but more than anything else, we would try as far as possible to create a common, or as Reinhard put it, a collaborative language where both parties could stay on the same page and enjoy a shared understanding of the expected outcomes. Next slide. So that really was the thesis behind Sirion. And then to accomplish all of this, what we found is we had three fundamental automation challenges. Number one, how do we simplify the ingestion of key information from the contract? So we had to invest in artificial intelligence there. Second, given the diversity of sources where performance data resides, how do we make it simple to connect with all of those sources and reconcile that raw performance data to the service levels and KPIs written in the contract? And last but not least, given this is an area of complex services, how do we automatically validate the invoice? By putting together all the fragments, allocating them their respective value, and then auditing the invoice. Those were the three major challenges, and over time, we have managed to almost half of the human effort involved, which we believe has moved the needle forward in driving this collaborative and common understanding. Next slide. So this really is the thesis behind Sirion. Automate as much as possible of the common effort and then create a shared understanding of what was expected, what actually happened, what are we billing each other for, and what the issues, as Reinhard put it on the relationship side, are. The product was launched in the market a few years ago, and we have been fortunate that some of the world's largest companies have come forward and joined this platform. What we are finding is that as the large suppliers also start joining this platform, Sirion is starting to evolve now from being a single monolithic installation to a larger global network where complex services are increasingly being exchanged. And at some point in the future, near future hopefully, we will be able to start distilling some of the insights that we're able to look at and collect from across the wider universe. So that is the broad understanding of the company and its evolution over time. What I will also mention in a very quick passing sentence is our original thesis was more restricted to complex services associated with outsourcing. So in a word, BPO, ITO, third-party facilities management, third-party logistics, and so on. But to our pleasant surprise, this technology has proven its efficacy in a variety of other use cases. We now find hospitals using it to manage medical services, train operators using it to build and manage trains, airport operators using it to manage airport services. So the variety of use cases is really proliferating, and this has been a very pleasant, I would say, a realization by us that complex services in general was crying out for a more obligation-based and a more transparent or collaborative approach to this area. So with that, I will turn it back and I'm much part of this discussion today. Hi, Tim. Do we still have you? Or Indus, should we open it up to Q&A?
Sure. So this is Indus. I'm your webinar host. I was on mute for a while. Thank you, Ajay. Ajay is the founder, CEO of Sirion, for the introduction about Sirion and how we have enabled Vodafone. I'm going to queue up some of the questions. The first one is for Reinhard. So Reinhard, the question is that process change in procurement takes a lot of time. What was the impact of this change, and how easy or difficult it was for employees and executives to get a buy-in to your modern vision? Over to you, Reinhard.
Thank you, Indus. So yes, I can only confirm that it takes time, right? I think I've stressed a few times that for us this has been a journey. This is a business transformation and a big change management program. There's been significant impact in all the organizational structure with the different parts of the business having to redefine the role they play in the organization. So again, yeah, as such, it would take a significant time, and it needs to be supported on an ongoing basis with a proper change management program and with proper communications and training and support. In terms of the support from the different parts of the business, yes, definitely. I think I would say at executive level, it has taken some time, but yes, definitely they've been extremely supportive to the vision, and they also see the benefits this can take back to the business. I would say it's more on the people side that we are probably spending more time still continuing to drive the change even nowadays. So I expect this journey to continue and this to be an ongoing process as we go along.
Thank you, Reinhard. I have another question lined up for Ajay. The question is kind of long. I'm going to kind of cut it short a little bit. So basically it says there are a lot of existing procurement technologies out there, CLM, P2P, performance management. Why do I need to implement yet another system? And he mentioned Vodafone CCM program. So Ajay, can you just elaborate, why do we need another system like Sirion to extend the capabilities as you outlined?
Happy to do that, and then probably Reinhard would be the right person to really provide his perspective, because they are one of the world's largest customers of SAP as well, and they have had the benefit of using P2P technology within that for a number of years. So my short perspective, and I really want to make this very simple, e-procurement is an inch thick and a mile wide solution. The idea behind that is to deploy a uniform discipline for managing the entire supply base and to ensure that we are following this common discipline both in onboarding, transacting, and paying those suppliers. Sirion is complementary to that. What it does is it allows the organization to drill down much deeper than the e-procurement or the P2P system on a select set of complex suppliers whose performance, whose invoicing is a lot more complex than the simple one-size-fits-all approach of a classical P2P system. So think of Sirion really as a microscope fitted on top of a classical P2P system, drilling down into an area of large exposure for the company, which is its critical supply base. That's the answer with respect to P2P. With respect to CLM, the answer is even more interesting. Traditional CLM was designed for the general counsel to manage the risk in the pre-contracting or the negotiation phase. And as such, the overwhelming focus of classical CLM tools, Aptus, Icertis, Selectica, Nextens, is to control and manage catastrophic risk or the likelihood of very, very unlikely events and distributed across both parties. Those tools are not designed to manage the business outcomes that are specified inside the contract. And that's where Sirion comes in. Sirion not only manages the legal risk like traditional CLM tools, but it also, by extracting the deliverables and obligations and breathing life into them post-signature, allows the business side of the organization to continue the process of value realization that traditional CLM is not able to do. So I'll turn it over to you, Reinhard. Perhaps you have a slightly more professional perspective on this as a practitioner.
Yeah, I think I can only concur with your statements, Ajay. In a way, I see in Sirion, unlike other solutions, a clear and flexible and adaptable solution to different type and sizes of contracts. But in a nutshell, for me, it actually makes the contracts come to life, right? Today, in the current CLM systems, the contracts are quite sterile. They just sit there. We have some metadata, as some companies call it, which are bits and pieces of the contract. To what degree are we actually making those elements live and actually enable the collaboration with your business partners through that contract? That's for me the key differentiator from Sirion. It actually allows us to bring contracts to life and to collaborate and to actually review and revisit where we have potential risks in a very simple manner. So I think that's quite powerful.
If I may just briefly comment, Ajay, to me, the critical point here is that the systems that are offered otherwise are very much inward-looking. They are about internal efficiency, about internal communication. Contracts are between organizations, and what your development has enabled is that crossing of borders or boundaries, if you like, with shared data, shared information, collaborative tools that actually take a lot of the sort of blame and argument out of a relationship and move it onto much firmer ground of discussing factual data.
Thank you, Tim, for that add-on to that question. We are almost at the hour, so I really appreciate your time, Reinhard, today, and of course, Ajay and Tim for joining us, and to the audience who participated from all across the world. I know we had almost 1,000 people registered for this, almost 350 active. You guys have a great day ahead of you. We will post the slides on our website and follow up on those questions as a blog post on SirionLabs.com's website. Again, thank you for joining. Have a great day and a great evening. Bye-bye.